What is philosophy? Have you ever wondered, what are you doing here? Where do we come from? Where are we going to? Why do we exist? These are questions that science has not been able to answer so far, not at least the ultimate answer. Religion gives an explanation, of course. There is a God that creates us and commands that we do this and do that. But for many people, those are not satisfactory answers. There has to be another way to learn, to know. That pursuit of knowledge, that passion to find out, that is called philosophy. The love to knowledge, the love of wisdom, through reason, through reflection. This is one of the great legacies of the Greek civilization, one of the most important pillars of the humanities. To be a subject of your own decisions, of your own conclusions, not believe what someone says, not believe that there is a power, an external power that tells us who we are or why we're here. You can believe with your heart, but the mind is always skeptical. And philosophers, that's what they do. They question, they ask, they always try to find a different explanation to what is irrational, dogmatic, biased, because that is precisely our last salvation to totalitarian regimes or to bullies, even if we are going to talk about our domestic daily life. How to fight brutal power through reason, through knowledge, through argumentation. So philosophy gives us those skills. Philosophy helps us to know ourselves better. And three of the most important philosophers of ancient Greece were Socrates, who lived some time after Pericles in the 4th century and was the great mentor of the other two great philosophers we're going to talk about, Plato and Aristotle. Of course, before Socrates there were philosophers like Anaximander and many others that are called the pre-Socratic, who are very interesting too. It's good to know their names and their worldviews. But the great contribution of what is called Western philosophy starts with Socrates, because Socrates had a very particular method of finding out the truth. He didn't lecture. He didn't say to his disciples, among others, Plato, you have to think this or think that. No. He applied what is called a maieutic method. He simply asked questions. He asked, why do you think this, and what do you think of that? And the disciple had to come out with his answers. To Socrates, that was the best way to learn, through self-knowledge, through self-reflection. So his disciple Plato, the most renowned one, wrote a series of dialogues. His works are called dialogues because that's what they actually are. Socrates talking with disciples, or Socrates talking to other characters of the city, and through dialogue, through conversation, little by little they arrive to a certain truth. Some of the most important dialogues written by Plato about Socrates, for example, The Banquet, which is a beautiful reflection about love, Phidias, Gorgias, the apology or defense of Socrates itself. We have to remember Socrates, because of his method of questioning the gods, of questioning the existing order, was perceived as a threat by the political power, and he finally was condemned to death, sentenced to death by drinking hemlock. So he became some sort of martyr of philosophy. His disciples paid tribute to him by writing his great lessons. And in the case of Plato, we have this beautiful array of dialogues about different themes, about the origin of the human beings, for example, the myth of the two halves of the hermaphrodite, According to this myth, we were men and women together in one single person, but then the gods became jealous and divided us. There's a theory about the origin of love. Love is not other thing than looking for our other half. So Plato and Aristotle, a disciple of Plato and friend too, became thinkers that were inspired by Aristotle, by Socrates. Aristotle particularly continued his own work, but as a good philosopher he also questioned his friend Plato. Aristotle wrote several treatises, the Ethics to his son Nicomachus, the Politics, which is the source of much of the Renaissance philosophy of the 15th and 16th centuries, Physics, the Rhetoric, Poetics. As you can see, Aristotle was like what we could say today a Renaissance man, except that he wasn't living in the Renaissance, he lived in ancient Greece. This is important because the Renaissance man model or paradigm is based precisely on the Greek philosophers who were not only thinkers, they were also inventors, they were artists, they were literary critics, they were many things at the same time. No? They tried not to limit knowledge to one single discipline or way of thinking, but to be flexible, to be eclectic. They wanted the human mind to exercise all its potential, so knowledge could be achieved in a better way, a more efficient way. Socrates, the mentor, the model, Plato, his disciple, who also forged the theory of the ideal models upon which reality is based. Reality is imperfect, according to Plato, and what we have to aspire to is the forms, the ideal forms that inhabit in a different sphere. So the work of human beings is to perfect themselves by following the model, not the existing matter, which is amorphous or imperfect. This kind of perspective is called Platonic, precisely because it proposes that there is something else beyond reality, something more perfect that we have to look for, and that is the model for the existing reality. Plato, in one of his dialogues called The Republic, precisely talks about the myth of the cavern or the cave in which human beings live in shadows. They don't distinguish very well one thing from the other. Only when one comes out of the cave, one is able to understand the truth of the ideals, the truth of the forms. And that is what would count towards a political system led by philosophers, of course. And so on. Aristotle, his disciple and friend, also said many things. Like, for example, Plato is dear to me, but dearer still is truth, a well-known phrase that talks about the capacity that Aristotle had to question, to challenge his own teacher. Another important saying by Aristotle is that man is by nature a political animal. Indeed, man, meaning men and women, the human species, tend to congregate in societies. Our nature is gregarious, our nature is to live in society. In order to perfect society, we have to reach an agreement, a political system that would allow us to live with political status, a civilized status. So philosophy has many applications to politics, to personal ethics, to our understanding of nature and the world, even to cook. That's something surprising, right? But you can philosophize about the nature of matter and the nature of ingredients too. Everything is considered philosophy if you assume a perspective that questions the facts, that always challenges pre-established concepts. This is one of the greatest contributions of Greek civilization.